I hope you've been able to pause the video and view the instructions and mission you have for this lesson. Remember that this lesson is actually combining Java programming with artificial intelligence and physics from science. So the objective of this lesson is that we're supposed to develop a game, and it's basically based on buoyancy so that we can help one of the Legion players from either of the Legion that the player would choose or the user would choose, whether the Almohad dynasty or the Pax Romana Legion, to be able to determine which items from a chosen treasure chest are the heaviest items that basically can sink. So they would be the ones that have the highest density. So we're going to go over some of the glossary in terms of buoyancy, understanding how items sink and float with buoyancy, and of course Archimedes' principle. So helping one of your Legion players determine which items sink the most, therefore the ones that have the highest density in that order, would help them create weapons that would defend against the enemies that could attack their empire. And I'm sure you've already seen that in the videos prior to the start of this lesson. So let's get started. The first thing you need to do is please make sure that you have an account on Replit.com. You can sign up for free on Replit.com. So once you go into Replit.com, I will do a very short sort of tutorial here to show you. Once you get into Replit.com, I'm going to log out of this account because this is my account. What you will see is the section where you can sign up. And Replit.com is like an online compiler. It's pretty popular. Many people around the world use it for vibe coding, etc. So here's where we're going to be coding this app. But we are going to go over the mission, of course. But the first thing you need to do is make sure you're signed up here. So once you click on sign up, it's a free sign up. You can either sign up with your Google Gmail account, or you can sign up with an email and password. Just make sure you remember the email and password if you're signing up with email and password. And if you're signing up with Google, then it automatically just signs you up. Now, once you've signed up with Replit.com, you can see that as a free user, you basically have 10 free repos to create. And the thing about Replit is that even if you use up your repos, you can still go back into any one of those repos, which means any one of those programs, and recreate a new one. So let's get started on this lesson. I'm really excited. So let's get started on making this game and learning about some very basic Java programming concepts that you would need to know to be able to create any game, software app, web app, or system solution. Now let's get over some of the instructions that you have seen in the video previously before you started this section of the lesson. The user mission, remember this is a density decoy. It says the enemy is launching a full naval assault. We can't repel with standard weapons. We need an overwhelming advantage immediately. The assets are Archimedes' mandate, so we've captured a haul of enemy siege materials, and this of course depends on the Legion, like I said. So we're trying to make this into a game app. We want to make it fun, so we're going to go with Legions. You can think as creatively as you want as you get on to create this program. The main objective is understand how you're able to set the graphics and show graphics in Java using the Java swing, and then you're going to be able to add your own extra elements, change your legions, add some edge to the game, and just make it your own simple touch. So it says that they've captured a haul of enemy siege materials. We assume that's probably in the treasure chest. And now they want to be able to determine which one of these materials are dense. And with that, they can be able to create, of course, weapons that can help defend against their enemies. So it says containing exceptionally dense materials needed to forge impenetrable armor and heavy caliber shots for our war machines. So that's basically what you're helping to do. The second part of the mission is that it is a mission of intellect, as it's mentioned here. So you must use Archimedes' principle to quickly determine which materials will sink. And your objectives are, number one, calculating density, determining buoyancy, prioritizing and securing by determining the heaviest sinking materials using the highest densities, as I've already mentioned. Therefore, this game should not waste time on floating lumber. We still can, however, make this game app determine which items did float or which items sunk the most, but the main objective is to look for the ones that are the heaviest from this enemy siege materials that they've captured. And that's something, again, we need to consider when creating this game. We have to make it in that manner, where it's kind of like choose your legion, and then help your legion determine which one of these items from the enemy siege materials that has been captured sink the most or have the heaviest densities to help them create, weapons for their war machines. So the success is, of course, the player would have to smash the enemy fleets and secure the Empire's fate. The fate of the Legion rests on your command of hydrostatistics. So, or hydrostatics. Let's get started on working on this game. So as I mentioned, once you've signed up with REPL, you would see your REPL looking like this, right? So once you've signed up, first thing you need to do, it's usually hidden. So you have to click on this explore more so you can start creating your first Java graphics game or Java graphics program. So once you click on developer frameworks, you would have to click on create, okay? Once you do that, you would have this option where you would need to select your template. So it's going to load. Here it is, template. What we're going to need for this game is we're going to use Java Swing. So Java Swing is like one of the graphics library in Java that helps to create like games, that anything that involves with graphics, pictures, text boxes, text fields, which you're going to learn in this lesson. So you would select Java Swing and then you'd have to give your game a name. So this is where AI comes in. We're going to be using Gemini.google.com. So we're going to be using the Gemini generative AI tool to help us create this game, help us generate graphics, help us understand generally the overall functionality of this game. So the reason I open this Gemini, once you go into Gemini.google.com, please make sure you open it on a new tab. You probably need to sign in, and you can sign in with Google as well, your Gmail account, and it's free. So Gemini is free. Just make sure that your account is for an age that's above, I think, 17, 18 years old, because sometimes when you try to create graphics on Gemini, if your age, I think, is under 17 or 18, correct me, I might be wrong on that, but you have to check it. It doesn't allow you to do that. So just make sure you have a normal Gmail account, one that is, of age, so you can be able to use this. It's just part of the principles and rules of Gemini. So Gemini is one of the generative AI tools I really like to use. Way better for me than ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude or all of those other. They all have their besties in what they do, but I prefer using Gemini, and you're going to see why. So the first thing I want to do is to get a name for this program. I want this to be a really cool name, so you can delete this title right here and just give it a really cool name. So we can ask Gemini, because we know this is based on buoyancy and Archimedes principle, integrating with Java programming and AI, we can basically generate a name here. But one thing I would say you should do before we do that is let's understand the game we're going to be creating first, so we can be able to ask Gemini based on that to give us some exciting, cool names for a game like that. And then we can start working on it. So I'm going to go to Moroccan Code Crafter Replit AI. This is an AI app that was designed and developed by Nazi Tech School, and the purpose is to help basically generate project ideas that can be used to create game apps or software apps. And we need one right now for what we're going to do. So I'm going to go into administrator mode. I'm going to sign in right now, and then you're going to see how it works. So Code Crafter is both for administrator, as I am the admin, but there's also paid users accounts. So I'm going to go right now into the administrator section. And as it loads on, it's going to open up the main Code Crafter homepage like this. So what are we looking for? So first thing you do when Code Crafter opens is that you have to select your subject of desire, depending on whatever subject you want to integrate with programming and AI to create a game app for, or web app for, or software app for. So right now we're on physics, and then the topic is buoyancy. I'm going to include that here. You can also add some extra things like Archimedes principle, just so that you give the AI a better idea of what kind of game, software app, or web app it can generate for you to work on. So I'm selecting buoyancy, Archimedes principle. I went for language English. There are different type of languages in here. You can standard languages that are kind of, more popular used. And then, of course, for different type of programming languages, depending on what. So we're going to switch over to Java because we're using Java right now. I'm going to go for a difficulty level of beginner, but there's different type of levels. So once we do that, we'll click on generate amazing ideas, and it's going to start opening up, generating for us a very cool idea that we can use and turn into whether we want to do a game app or a software app or web app. It really depends on you, who's the programmer, the software designer and developer. So you just got to give it some time because it does take like about a minute or so to generate a topic. And one thing to keep in mind is if you're a paid user using Code Crafter, you do have about 7 chances of usage. So you got to keep in mind that as well so that you don't get to, use it over and over again. Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention that I actually wanted to add here was legions, because I want us to create something based on the theme of this lesson, which was either on 2 legions or 3. You can choose whatever legion you want. It's not necessarily have to be what we have on the first part of the lesson, but I want to do it based on that. Right now, we're getting something from Codecrafter saying that imagine you're a curious scientist in a virtual bathtub. You can pick objects made up of various materials like wood, block, rock, or rubber duck, and just drop them into the container of water. Your task is to predict whether each object will float or sink, then watch the simulation to see if you were right. This simple Java app will help you understand how objects' weight and volume of water it displays to determine the buoyancy. I mean, this is pretty cool, but I would like to go back and make a modification. So I'm going to say determine, let's put that in, which item from the Almohad dynasty, which item from the enemy siege materials. I'm actually going to add that extra thing from the enemy siege materials, because that's what we had there in the scenario. Captured, yes, so that's captured by the Almohad dynasty or the Pax Romana Empire. Will sink the most, right? Using buoyancy. So let's go over that and use that. Okay, so I gave a bit more detail to this, and I included, if you notice, we did include buoyancy, Archimedes principle, but I gave more details. So the more detailed you are whenever you prompt AI, the better it gives you results. So let's click on generating amazing ideas. Let's see now what we can get, because this is a great idea for someone who's just, if you're just like creating a general buoyancy sort of app or game. This is also a very cool one for a beginner. But I think giving more specification based on what you're given to do in this lesson, and also always think like a software designer that wants to create something that people will actually enjoy. So you want to create a game that's pretty fun, that has legions, that has things going on, more of action, and not just a very straightforward game, even though you could at times do something like that, but you actually want something where people would enjoy playing. So I think adding this extra, pitch in here just makes it better. Okay. So it's giving us this Almohad siege engineers buoyancy challenge. Let's read about this. After a grueling siege, the Almohad dynasty engineers have captured a diverse collection of enemy siege materials. Okay, now you can see that, the AI tool is giving us something in specification, more of what we want. It's ranging from massive wooden beams and various stones to heavy metal tools. You, as a junior engineer, are tasked with the critical challenge that you must swiftly determine which of these captured items would sink the most rapidly if thrown into the nearby Strait of Gibraltar. This is really cool. I like the idea of the whole throwing into the Strait of Gibraltar. Although we want to help the legions, the objective of the game would be to help one of the legion players to determine which item would sink the most faster. So using your app, using the game app you're creating, rather than just throwing every single one of them and seeing which one would sink the most. But this idea is pretty good because we can use that idea of getting one of the Legion players initially to sort of look like he's throwing items that are being captured from the enemy siege materials into the Strait of Gibraltar, which is pretty cool for this dynasty, of course, if they choose it. This knowledge can be crucial for quickly disposing of unwanted materials or identifying suitable objects for underwater anchors. So now we know what the Legion's going to make with them, underwater anchors, or make with them cannonballs or something that could attack their empire's enemy. You need a simple Java tool to input the properties of these materials and calculate their sinking potential based on the principles of buoyancy and Archimedes. That's pretty cool. So what Codecrafter does is that it gives you a scenario and then it gives you a problem statement of exactly what you're trying to develop. So whenever you use Codecrafter, I would say really just go through all the information because it gives you a really good breakdown of everything you need to basically create the program and as simple as possible. It even gives you a sample Java code right here, which we're going to also make our own from scratch because ours is going to be graphics, not just console based. So one thing I want to go up and show you, one more thing, is the problem statement. So this is something for programmers. Of course, you always have to have a problem because you're trying to create a solution. And in this case, we're trying to create a game app solution that will help one of our Legion players basically determine which item sinks the most. So here it says developer Java console application. It allows a user to input mass and volume. We're going to understand, if you don't already know this, when you're calculating density, you need to know the mass and the volume of the item because you'd have to divide mass by volume to find the density. When you find a density, remember that we're dealing with the liquid here as water. because these items were going to be placed in water to help one of the Legion players to be able to attack their enemies. So our main liquid of where these items are going to be used in is water. So it's really important also to know the liquid you're using, because you would need to know the density of the liquid where these items are going to be placed in. So the application would then calculate each material's density and the buoyant force it would need to experience in water. Finally, it will determine which items floats or sinks and identifies which of the sinking items would sink the most, and that means the one that goes in the highest density order, indicating a greater tendency to sink deeper or faster, which is great for attacking the enemies. Now, one of the important things, I'm going to skip the target audience, which just basically explains this game, who this game is targeted for. I'm going to go into the core features, which is basically what we're going to need to do. Like, this explains to you the order in which you're going to need to program your game. So here it says, allow the user to input the mass in kilograms and volume in cubic meters for at least 3 different siege materials from the treasure chest. So let's assume that these siege materials are kept in the treasure chest. And then it says that we need to calculate the density of each material by dividing the mass with the volume. And like I told you, it also says we need to calculate the buoyant force acting on each material submerged into water. And so buoyant force is a formula that we can actually explore. It's not part of this program's mission, but it's something to explore, which is a great thing to add as an extra feature to your game. But one thing, as I told you, to keep in mind is that the water density is 1,000 kilograms per meter cube, and then the gravity of Earth is 9.8 meters per second square. So for beginner simplicity, buoyant force is calculated based on the object's full volume. To determine if a material would float or sink, you have to compare that material's density to the density of water, which we're going to learn more about. We have to display a summary for each material, including the name, the density, and the calculated buoyant force, maximum possible, whether it floats or sinks. So we basically also have to think about, when we're creating this game, when we actually help one of the legions to determine which item sinks the most, we have to put it in sort of a table of information depending on what item was selected. So we're going to make this game fun, whereby the player would start off by allowing the legion player, he or she selects in the game, to be able to pick an item from one of those items that were seized from the enemy siege. It could be in a treasure chest or whatever it is. And once they pick the item, once the player picks the item, which is going to be sort of like a random thing, we're going to use a random class to do that, which you'll see later. Then we can be able to now say, okay, so the game's now click on this to determine if it will sink or float. And so, as they do that, the game is processing, and then it asks them to enter the mass, and they would ask them to enter the volume of the item, and then it would tell them what the calculated density is that they should calculate and input it in there, because we're trying to teach them as well physics, but also playing it in a game. And then once they put it in, then maybe our game app could say, okay, well, you got this right. This item has this density, making it heavy because it's this and that, according to the rule of buoyancy. So then at the end of the day, we can determine which items, would have the highest density. So we can do it in that way, or we can just do it in an order of, we could ask the player to keep that in mind and record, and then in an order of which ones has the highest density. So here it says identify and state which of the sinking materials has the highest density, indicating which one would sink the most. We definitely need that information during the whole gameplay, so we can save the one with the highest density. So we're going to be doing that. So let's get started off first by creating this program. Now that we kind of have an overview of what kind of game app program we can create and make it fun, and according to Legions, the next thing we can do, of course, you can scroll down and read more information, but I'm just going to skip all of this and move on. This is more about how you can enhance your game and make it even better. So I'm going to export this document. If you like the idea, what you do on CodeCrafter is you export your document. That's what you're going to use as your reference while developing your program. I'm going to put my name in here, and that would be the name of your author, basically you. And then, of course, we're going to get started by clicking next, and then we download this as a text file, because it's really better when you have it as a text file. You can put it into your repo really easily. And once that is done, it's going to download. As you can see, if I go back into my downloads, I have it right here. And if I open it up, all the information that we just read is in here, so we can use it as a reference. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to log out of CodeCrafter. Now we know what our game is about, so we can now go back to Gemini. Let's get a cool name for our game. So you can prompt your AI and say, give me some cool names for a game app that is used to determine which item from a captured, you got to be detailed here, okay? From a captured enemy siege, which item from a captured enemy siege, which item, I want to kind of, I'm thinking about it. From a captured enemy siege, which item from, okay, I'm going to rephrase this. From a treasure chest, okay, captured as an enemy, captured from an enemy siege by the Almohad Dynasty Legion or the Pax Romana Legion. And by the way, you can find out more about any one of these dynasties and empires. Pax Romana Empire. Yeah, I think if if you're into that whole history thing, of course, and it's really relevant, especially when you're trying to create a game based on that. So give me some cool names for a game app that is used to determine which item from a treasure chest captured from an enemy siege by the Almohad Legion or the Pax Romana Empire. Yeah. Oh, that is used to determine which item from a treasure chest captured. Okay, would, you got to continue. Would sink to make sense, right? Or float according to buoyancy. Okay. And you can even add Archimedes' principle. So you got to be really precise just so that the AI gives you something that you need. Now you just send it out and see what kind of names. So it's giving you based on different sort of sections. Here it's giving me a name for historical and scientific focus. So I got to see which one I like. Choose the one you like. I've got one Almohad's Ascents, Pax Romanus Plunder, the Archimedes Vault, Density Decree. And it's even explaining to you what these names are. So that's pretty cool as well. Sacrosanct. So I'm just looking through them and just go through the one you like. Tide of the Spoils. And then Siege Secret. Sunken Artifacts. Legion's Loss. Plunger's Gain. I need something that would be a Legion thing. So what are the top recommendations? It says I would suggest Pax Romanus Plunder or the Archimedes Vault. Plumb Line. You can ask it to give me more cool names. Give me some more cool names. You basically prompt your AI one more time. So I'm just looking for something. Seed Spoil Solver. Okay, so I want something that's both for both legions, not just for one. I'm gonna call this one, okay, I think I might go with one. I think I would go with the Siege Secret, which I think is pretty cool because the Siege Secret would just be, it's based on highlighting the capture and the puzzle effect. I mean, that could be one. Or the Tide of Spoils could also be one because that's the tide of, it suggests a large quantity of treasure and water element. I mean, that could be great. That could be one. This one's also good, Sacrosanct. So that's it. Or the Density Decree. You know what? I'm just gonna go with the Density Decree. I think that's pretty cool. It kind of like encompasses everything that we need. But of course, you guys can choose the ones you want. Or I could go with Tide of Spoils. So I think I'm just gonna go with the Tide of Spoils. It's really hard to determine a name. So I'll go with this one, Tide of Spoils. Game app, you can just put as game. If you don't want to put an app, you can put whatever you want in the title. So this is what I'm going to write here. And then I'm going to click on create app. So that's it. Once you've done this, remember to select Java Swing and put your title. Now click on create app, and what REPL it would do is that it will take you to your very first section of where you create your app or your program or your game, anything. So here you can just click the X, close this button or this pop-up. One thing about Replit is that it's kind of rearranged differently. So one thing you need to pay attention to is this little paper icon that's next to publish. If you click on it, it's called your file tree. This is where you see your program, and your Java program is inside of the source folder, inside of main, inside of the Java folder. You have your Java program right here. So what I would suggest you do is move your file tree to the left side. I particularly like mine on the left side. So if you're happy with it on the right, you can keep it there. But if not, you can click on the 3 vertical dots and just say move file tree to the left, and it goes all the way here. So this is kind of the usual arrangement I have when I'm using Replit, and I really like the arrangement like this. The next thing you want to do is you notice that there's something saying new chat with agent. We're not going to be using the AI agent to create this, although in future, once you get better in programming, you can definitely use AI agents to help you or assist you in creating your code, your app, your system, your game, whatever it is. But right now, you're going to start learning the basics of programming, specifically for Java, for this lesson precisely. And so we're not going to use the agent. So you can just drag this site, drag this section to the left. Just click on it right here in the middle, and then just drag it to the right side. Another thing you do need to set up is that I'm going to explain what these import statements mean. Whenever you create a new program using Java Swing on Replit, it automatically gives you all these code blocks right here. So there's some things that you got to get rid of. For example, we don't need this border. The import javax.swing.border, we don't need it because we're not putting border for anything. However, we do need the abstract window toolkit, which is called the AWT, and we do need swing. So both of them are basically used. I can just add a comment right here. The AWT, which is also called the abstract window toolkit, is basically used to create the GUI. And when we talk about the GUI, we're talking about the graphical user interface. That means the screen in which the user is going to be interacting with while playing this game. And then the swing, of course, is the one that's used also to create. So both of them come hand in hand, and the swing is also used to create the graphical user interface and has all the elements that you need for the graphical user interface, like the elements to be able to put a picture, or the elements to be able to put a JLabel, or the elements to be able to put like a button, etc., etc. So we do need the swing, and we do need the abstract window toolkit to be able to create this game. Another thing you would need to do is you need to get rid of this private static void method. You don't need this method because we're going to create our own from scratch. And you are going to be learning, as you've already seen previously in this video for this lesson, you're going to be learning the basic Java programming concepts, and some of the concepts that include, you're going to learn about the random class, because like I told you, what we want to do probably in this game, since we have our instructions, is we want the player to be able to select their player legion, select their legion first, whether it's the Almohad dynasty or the Pax Romana, and from there they would select the player, or they would just be a player that represents any of those legions. We can put it in our game, and that player would be the one that would have to pick a random item from the enemy siege materials in the treasure chest, and then this app would be able to determine if that item can sink or float. It's very simple, clear, straightforward, but fun game. And you can add extra elements to it to make it even better. So I'm going to get rid of this create and show. We don't need this here because we just deleted the method, so we don't need to call it. Now I want to start explaining to you some of these things. So I've explained to you that if you wanted to start creating any Java program that involves graphics, where you want to put picture, or you just want to create a software or game app, you definitely need to make sure you import these libraries. You need the first one, which is the abstract window toolkit, and you need the second one, which is the swing library. So you make sure you have those, and you put that in your first 2 lines. Another thing I want to say is something that I particularly like to do as a programmer is it's a good thing to put headers in your program, and what headers means is information about you and your code. So in case if you share this code with someone else, they have a basic idea, especially somebody who doesn't know much about programming, but they would have a basic idea to understand what your program is about, what your game is about, the logic behind it. So how you're able to put headers is you're going to add something called multi-line commenting in Java, which is basically writing comments that don't affect your code. Comments are not codes. They're just information statements. Like what I just did here, I put 2 backward slashes, I think they're called. And I put that just to explain what this line was. So this is what we call a single line comment. There's these 2 backslashes. So it doesn't affect your code. It has nothing to do with coding. That's why it's called a comment. is just something you put there in your code, especially as an organized programmer, just to explain things that are happening in your code or just sections of your code. So if someone who's a programmer going through your code is looking at your code, they would better understand the flow of your system, your app, your game, or whatever you've created. So now I'm going to put a multi-line comment, and this is how we do it in Java. We put a slash, then an asterisk, and then you give some space, and then you put an asterisk, and then you close it with a slash. And so this is what we call a multi-line comments, because you're going to put multiple lines in there. So what we'll do is put our headers. We start with the headers by putting author name. So put your author name. Author name is just like the author of a book. So it's basically your name. So what's your name? The programmer. I'm going to put my name in here. Program name means the name of your program, which already you've given at the top here. So the same kind of name. So Tide of Spoils is what my name of my game is. Just type it out. And .java, meaning it's a Java program, obviously. And then the next thing you want to do is to put in what we call the date created. Or before that, we actually have to put in the important thing, which is program description. And here's where you're going to describe what your program, what your game app. So you're going to say this program is a game app application where the user, who's the player, gets to select a legion from either, we have two options, right? Again, you don't have to have the same thing as I'm doing. You can get your own legions from either the Almohad dynasty or the Pax Romana Empire, right? Oh, I need to put that right. So empire. So the player needs to select a legion from either the Almohad dynasty or the Pax Romana Empire to help the legion player, determine which item from which item from a series of items, right? From a series of items captured from an enemy siege, right? Would sink or float, right? So which item would sink or float in water? So you could just give that definition. So basically determines which item from a series of items captured from an entry would sink or float in water. And then you could just add something here to give the logic of this game. So the logic is that the items that sink the most can help the legion, create, we said anchor weapons, right? I think it was called anchor weapons for war machines to fight against the empires, to fight against the enemy. So simple as that. You can see it's a very simple, crisp definition, crisp summary of what this whole game app is meant to do and what it's going to be doing. And then lastly, what we're going to do is put the date created. So according to this, while I'm recording this video for this tutorial, it's on the 28th of November, 28th of November, 2025. Oh, my bad, 28th of October, 2025. I'm going 1 month ahead. So that's pretty much it right here. So this is what you need to set up to put your headers. You need to put your author name, program name, and you always have to put .java indicating it's a Java program, of course. And then your program description. Remember that when you do download this program, all this information would be there as well. So now we are ready to code. You can eliminate the extra space. And then next thing I want to explain is in Java, Java is mostly about classes and objects, okay? Whenever you create a Java program, the first thing you do is you create your class. And in your class is always the one that ends the most. So it always has, you do the public, you must have a public, which is what we call an access modifier. We have different type of access modifiers. We have public, private, protected. I will explain that as we go on in this video tutorials to understand the difference between the two or between the three of them. But right now, generally, when you say public, it means that any other class that you create, because you can create as many classes as you want, but any other class can access things from this class as well. Now, all classes must start with an opening curly brace and a closing curly brace, and then each class basically should have a main method. This is called a main method, and this is pretty much your driver that makes this program run, okay? So when you have a class with a main method, it's considered as a driver class because you have the driver method here, and without this main method, the class cannot run. So sometimes once you start learning more about Java programming and object-oriented programming concepts like encapsulation, inheritance, abstraction, polymorphism, you're going to understand that sometimes when you use those type of OOP concepts, you actually would have to put this main method in another class because you're trying to connect between the two classes or three classes, depending. But right now, just understand that every Java program should have a main method to be able to run the program. So this is called the main method. It is public, static, void, main string arguments. ARG means arguments, and arguments means whatever goes inside of this main method, like here, anything that goes in here. So this also has to have an opening curly brace and a closing curly brace. So here you can just say the main class is where you can say the entry point of the program, right? It's the starting point, and then this is the main method. So the main method is the entry point of the program as well. I'm going to take out this. This is just automatically generated, or you can say the main method is what makes the program run, just so you remember that. So I'm putting single line comments to explain these lines. Now, to get started on our game, we definitely need to first create the graphics. We need a nice home screen that would basically represent what our game is about, buoyancy, about the two dynasties, or at least a dynasty and the empire. So we need that to represent the idea behind the game. And we also need to learn a little bit more about buoyancy, about Archimedes' principle, and some information more. So we're going to be doing that right now.